Welcome to Canadian Justice. I'm Christine Van Gyn, and today we're discussing the recent turmoil at Rogers, the multi-billion-dollar Canadian telecom giant. The drama started when Ed Rogers sought to replace Rogers' CEO, Joe Natale, blaming him for the firm's underperformance. Ed's plan to replace Natale was exposed when the man picked to replace Natale, Tony Staffieri, accidentally pocket-dialed Mr. Natale while discussing the change with someone else. Upon learning of the plan, Mr. Natale informed an independent board director, prompting an emergency board meeting. At that meeting, Ed's mother, Loretta Rogers, and her daughters backed Natale. They voted to remove Ed as the chairman of the Rogers board, and Ed then moved to create a new board. This created an untenable situation where two boards claimed to represent the company. All this while the $26 billion merger with Shaw is still pending. Ed Rogers filed suit in British Columbia, and the BC court ended up siding with Ed, finding that he had the power to reconstitute the board of directors. The company has said it will not appeal. And now, Joe Natale is out and Tony Staffieri is in as temporary CEO. Here today to discuss the family civil war are two legal experts, David Milosevic and Michael Benetti. Thank you both so much for joining me today. Now, David, that was my brief summary of the story, but of course, there's a lot more going on. Is there anything that you'd like to add to the background of the case for our viewers?
I think you've got it all there, Christine. I think the real background is why did this happen when it happened? And it appears to be that Ed Rogers was not happy with Joe Natale in the lead up to this Shaw acquisition or merger. And wanted to replace him with his own choice of CEO. So that seems to have informed the background, and that's what we know.
So, Michael, same question. Is there anything that you want to add to the background of this case? And actually, where do things stand now?
I think there's an interesting family component to it. That's not really a legal one that seemed to bubble to the surface. Where things stand now is Mr. Natale is out. And Mr. Staffieri's in, and basically everybody's prognostication about Ed Rogers being able to do this has come true.
So, Michael, the way that Ed Rogers made this move to reconstitute the board was by way of what's called a consent resolution, and that happened on October 21st. That was the case that the BC court was asked to determine whether that consent resolution was valid. Can you explain what arguments were made in court about why it wasn't valid?
So the interesting thing about that case is, there's a general rule where if you're the majority shareholder or control a majority of the votes, you generally have the power to dictate how a company is going to be run.
In this case, just to interrupt, in this case, it was a family trust that Ed controlled that was the majority shareholder, right?
Correct. And they control a majority of the shares that can vote. What most people don't know about this company is it has a dual class structure. So the shares that you and I may own in mutual funds or whatnot are Class B shares. They have no votes. The Rogers Family Trust controls all the votes, all the class of shares that have a vote. So really what was at issue is, can that class of shareholder that doesn't have the value of the company in it, can he, with the stroke of a pen, essentially change these directors? And that's what the judge said that he could do. You were asking about the consent resolution. This all started with something that they called an ordinary resolution, and that's the stroke of a pen. Can he do that? And ultimately, the judge said in a very long decision that he could.
Now, David, another nub of the case was whether the company's articles, whether those required a full shareholder meeting in order to reconstitute the board, rather than just the consent resolution. And a lot of that was informed by this document that was disclosed relating to Rogers' founder, Ed's father, Ted, his wishes. These wishes were outlined in a document. What can you tell us about that?
Sure. So the basic issue about whether Ed could do this is contained in the articles, in Article 3.4 of the Rogers articles. And that says that you can change, remove, or replace directors using an ordinary resolution. So that was clear. Then the issue arose, well, what is an ordinary resolution? It's not defined in the articles. So the court had to look at the British Columbia Corporations Act to see, okay, so what is an ordinary resolution? How can you do this? And that was the interpretative exercise by the court. The family, Loretta...
David, we've actually got to go to commercial break, but I want to let you finish when we come back. We will be right back.
Certainly.